Hello and welcome to another Authors at Google Talk, coming to you from Irvine, California. Today we are welcoming Hal Niedzviecki. Hal is the founder of Broken Pencil magazine and has published numerous works of social commentary and fiction, including Hello, I'm Special, How Individuality Became the New Conformity, and We Want Some Too, Underground Desire and the Reinvention of Mass Culture. Follow Hal on his blog, The Peep Diaries. Welcome, Hal.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. So, the story of this book, The Peep Diaries, How We're Learning to Love Watching Ourselves and Our Neighbors, really starts about 4 years ago when I become a father and my social life starts to, take a precipitous downturn. Used to go out. And then all of a sudden, I didn't go out. Anyone who has, had that experience knows what I'm talking about. So social life was diminished. A lot of my hipster friends were no longer my friends, and this is what things started to look like. Pretty much, there's me, and there's my back hair. There's the child. She does not yet have back hair. She will hopefully take after her mother in that regard. So, yeah, basically the social life is diminishing to the point where I began to think that really I didn't have too many friends. I started to wonder if I had any friends. As you get more into the daddy thing and everything just kind of changes. At the same time, I was starting to get into things like Facebook and Twitter and these kinds of things, which, we had all kind of flirted with, Friendster or whatever, but no one really got seriously into it. And I was developing a lot of friends on that. Oh, there's my social life again. There's me at the park. You can see I'm looking happy. Not. I'm like, where did my life go? Right, so I am basically spending a lot of time at home with the kid, and I'm online a lot. And at one point I noticed that, hey, good old Hal has 700 friends on Facebook, but he doesn't actually have any friends in real life. That's so sad, such a sad life. So I had this genius idea, which was that I would have a Facebook party. And I would invite all my Facebook friends to come and meet me at a local bar. And we would get to know each other, and I would resuscitate my, my social life, which was basically on complete life support. I needed to pull the wires out and be like, zzz, on Hal's social life, which was, every time I left the house, my wife was like, where are you going? And why aren't you taking the baby? So I decide I'm going to have this Facebook party, and I go ahead and I invite all whatever 700 Facebook friends that I have at that time, and I say, I want you to meet me at this local bar around the corner from my house. I'm buying. Come out and we'll hang out. And I send this invitation out, and I got a pretty good response. About 30 people said they were maybe coming, and about 15 people said they were for sure coming. And, a couple of hundred just said no, and a lot just ignored me. So there I am. I'm at the bar. I've informed the bar that, I've got between 20 and 30 people coming to my Facebook party. And I'm ready for action. So yeah, I put my nice shirt on, I combed my hair, I shaved. Just more than I can say now. I just flew in from Chicago, and you got all that. You can't bring razors and shaving cream and everything, so I'm a little unkempt today. You'll forgive me. So I'm waiting for my friends to show up. Where are they? No one showed up yet. It's getting dark. There's me. As you can see, I've run through a few beverages at this point. Things are starting to. I'm starting to wonder what's going on exactly. So no one's there. I'm waiting, and Oh, there we go. My Facebook friend has shown up, Paula. Unfortunately, she is the only person who shows up to my Facebook party. So only one person shows up of the 700 invited. Paula, she's very sweet. She has a boyfriend. She plays some form of sport, which I forget right now. She works in customer service. She read one of my books, thought it'd be nice to meet me, and so we had this nice talk. Except I kept kind of apologizing for the fact that I had invited her to a party, and in fact I was the only member of the party, and I kept kind of looking over my shoulder every time the door opened, praying that someone else would arrive to save us from this socially awkward moment. But that never happened. Nobody else arrived, and it was just me and Paula. And then Paula, finished the drink that I bought her and announced that she was now going home. So that brought me to a kind of weird inspirational moment, if you can call it, or like de-inspirational moment. There I am. Paula's left now, so I'm back to drinking beer on my own. I'm an impressive fellow. I can drink a lot of beer on my own. Right, so I had this kind of, this moment where I began to think, if we're not using these social networks for what we claim we're using them for, which is to meet people and connect and deepen our friendships and make new friends, then what exactly are we using them for? And there's me going home. There I am. I'm done. I closed. They threw me out of the bar. They're like, Hal, no one else is coming. That's it. You're out of there. Okay, so I began to think that, in fact, most of us claim that we're using Facebook and other social networking sites to connect and make friends and deepen friendship. But I began to think that, in fact, maybe we were also doing something else, which was basically kind of watching each other the way we watch television, sort of moving through people's lives. And I formulated this theory that we were moving from a pop culture to a peep culture. And in pop culture, we derived our entertainment from watching celebrities perform. And in peep culture, we are deriving our entertainment from watching people go about their lives, go about their ordinary lives. And obviously, the elements of peep culture include things like reality TV, like blogging, social networks, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. So here we have my little chart here, the pop versus peep chart. So pop, stars have talent. Peep, who needs talent? Pop, the lives of celebrities are interesting. Peep, I'm interesting, and so are you. Pop, when will they discover me? Peep, too late. I've already discovered myself. It's kind of funny that I guess this is going to be on YouTube at some point, right? So it's like all these clips I stole from YouTube are going to go back on YouTube, some sort of twisted way. Okay, so there's three kinds of peep culture that I've identified. We just saw, this is peeping ourselves. This is, again, a video I took from YouTube that is this girl, and she talks about different parts of her body as she goes through and talks about her feet and her hands, and this created a bunch of copycat videos, perhaps in the hundreds, maybe even the thousands, of similar talks of people showing different parts of their body and discussing their feelings about them. So this is one kind of peeping ourselves. Obviously, there are many others. Again, we have blogs. We have what we do on Facebook. We have the information we put out on Twitter. We have all these different ways that we peep ourselves. So here's a quote from Julia Allison, who was on the cover of Wired and sort of featured as being one of the great kind of Web 2.0 net celebrities. And she told Wire about herself peeping. I treat it like a fire. You have to add logs or it'll be like one of those YouTube videos that flame out. And after the article came out in Wire, she wrote on her blog, the irony, of course, is that publicity is a full-time job. I did over 24 print interviews and 350 television segments in the last year. I taught my brain to think in sound bites, in PR nothing speak, to project authority on subjects I have no real knowledge about. It's a game, but I'm a bit tired of playing it. Now I need to unlearn much of that. So I thought that was a really interesting observation on this whole phenomena of kind of peeping yourself, that you become really involved in it, and it's kind of something that becomes very hard to unlearn. So now we have peeping each other, which is my sort of second category of peep culture. Here, this guy is going to walk over, and you can't really see the news. There's a newspaper at the foot of the driveway, and he's going to walk over, and he's going to kick the newspaper behind that couch being put out for the garbage, and he's going to bend down, grab it, and run away, which is amusing to watch in its own right. But what's really interesting to me about this, of course, is that the neighbor whose newspaper is being stolen is filming this to put up on YouTube or wherever. So instead of maybe going out and saying, hey, why are you stealing my newspaper? We have a problem. We're peeping each other. We're creating entertainment out of these weird moments in life. This is the naked wizard. He was wearing some sort of wizard outfit before he decided to take it off in a moment of perhaps incoherent, spontaneous happiness. Anyway, the police are eventually going to wrestle him to the ground, handcuff him, and taser the shit out of him, which is unfortunate, but not really the reason we're watching this. As you might notice, as his situation intensifies, more and more people gather around behind him, and this is at the Coachella Music Festival. So more and more people are gathering around behind him, and they're filming him. And the more violent the situation gets, the more it escalates, the more people are watching this, which again is, I think, a symptom of peep culture. It's part of the way peep culture works, that we watch each other, we're peeping each other, and we sort of move away from getting actually involved in situations, in environments. We just tend to sort of sit back and watch. So then there's this third category, peeped by the other, which is this whole world of search engines, corporations, different kinds of entities that facilitate peeping, that make it easy for people to peep on each other and do peeping themselves. Obviously, Google is part of that category. And this is Pipple, which, I don't know, some sort of Google ripoff, I guess, that does Pipple. Anyway, I put my name into Pipple, and it kind of provides me with a list in categories of different ways, that different information you can find Hal, and I'm sure that there are people in this room who can tell me how this works a lot better than I mean, I have no clue how it works, but all I know is the kind of social effects of it. So there's some of the results of when I put my name in. It's like every picture I've ever had put up on the internet comes up, all different links and blogs, and basically tons of information about Hal. And it's neatly ordered, so there's different categories of find Hal, locate Hal, various variations on locating, finding, and accessing Hal. That's a lot of Hal. I don't know who would ever want to do that. But so this is kind of being peeped by the other, which is a kind of peep culture facilitating of peep, making it happen, collecting this information, amalgamating it, organizing it. Here's another category of peeping by the other. This is net detective. Obviously, you can go online, and I ordered a net detective search on my father for $34.95, I believe it was. I was going to do myself, but I live in Canada, so they wanted $350. So I was like, fine, do Dad. Again, you get a dossier that's not that dissimilar from what you get on Pipple, which is kind of just everything that there is to know about my father. It's a little bit more precise through Net Detective. You get his mortgage, how much he owes on the house, what income bracket he's in, if he's retired or not, how many kids he has, all these different categories. And this is a sort of weird entertainment that we access if we so choose. And this is part of this rise of peep culture, that we can go and do these things for pretty much the same cost as a movie and popcorn. It was actually really funny because when I got the Net Detective information, there was this one part that was like criminal report. And I was all excited. I was like, now I'm finally going to find out the truth about Dad. So I tear open this piece of paper, and it's like, speeding ticket. Like, that was not impressive for me. I thought Dad maybe had like a third life, or even a second life would have sufficed to make Dad more interesting. Come on, Dad, get going. Where's your fifth wife? And I don't know. Your entire career as a Canadian Secret Service agent. Anyway, okay, right. So in Peepville, we watch ourselves and each other. It's what we do. Obviously, in the book, I set out on this sort of quest to understand why we're suddenly so interested in peeping, why we're moving from pop culture to peep culture with such reckless abandon. So I start to explore some of the people who do peep. This is Lisa Sargisi, who is a woman who blogs and video blogs about her life. She started blogging about 4 years ago, I think, when she was about to have gastric bypass surgery. She was morbidly obese, could barely kind of stand, and so she was going in for this surgery, and right before that she started to seriously blog about her experiences. So this is obviously someone who has been peeping herself very, very seriously over the last 4 years. So I'll read a little bit. This is from her blog, and she writes on her blog, "My story doesn't matter. At least I don't think my story mattered until folks started to thank me for sharing it. My fear, my low self-esteem, my aversion to exposure and confrontation made me want to hide. For years I did hide. I hid behind a mountain of fat. I'm still fat, at least by society's standards. No one takes into consideration that I can walk from my classroom to my car without sitting 3 or 4 times. No one looks at my big ass and applauds me for getting off it. No one is sympathizing with my impending reconstructive surgery to cut off all the inevitable loose skin. No one does until I tell my story." And this is a video that she put up right after getting the surgery. You can see that she's really, showing everything, not hiding anything, and that's a video that's linked to her blog and up on YouTube. So talking to Lisa made me really realize just how kind of affirming peep culture can be. This idea of no one's going to care about my story unless I tell it, unless I put it in front of people and say, look at me, this is what I'm going through. You need to pay attention to my story. At the same time, I noticed an evolution on her blog where she kind of starts off wanting to connect, wanting to tell her story and hopefully help other people. And then as she moves on, she becomes really very focused on the idea that she has a following, that she is perhaps moving on to a career as a kind of self-help guru. And so later on in her blog, I notice, a couple of years later, she writes, "What is this drive I have to be some badass rock star celebrity? I don't know why I want more, I just do." So she very quickly kind of illustrates, I think, the addictive nature of peep culture, just how much having some followers who seem to be interested in the mundane details of your life becomes a powerful feeling, an empowering feeling for you. And now she really talks about wanting to be kind of the Oprah Winfrey of people who go through gastric bypass surgery. So another person I met who is in this category of seriously being a peep participant, this is Emmeline. She does a video blog about her life. You saw her there. Is about to have her daughter, and she started the blog right around that time. And she told me that she was lonely, and that she's a young woman, and none of her friends were sharing this experience with her because they, of course, were off to college or whatever. It's not very common for 20-year-olds now to have kids. And she told me that her blog is a way for her to reach out and connect with people and kind of break out of her loneliness. So I'm going to read you a quote. This is a discussion that ran alongside one of her videos that she posted, and it was a video talking about her life in which she was wearing a kind of shirt that was cropped like here, so it was like a crop top shirt. So she has this discussion with this guy, we'll call him O'Neill. So this is O'Neill. He says, can you do another video in that belly shirt? Are you wearing underwear in this video? You are hot. And Emmeline says, yes, I am wearing underwear. No, I don't really own belly tops. O'Neill, what kind of underwear were you wearing? Can you do another video in the belly shirt from the video? You do have a sweet belly button. Emmeline, I don't really disclose what type I wear over the internet, but use your imagination. I don't like doing belly videos because the comments I get tend to creep me out, to be perfectly honest. O'Neill, I do not mean to freak you out. I would just like you to do another video in the belly shirt you are wearing in the video. Can I guess what kind you are wearing? G-string or thong? Emmeline, haha, I won't be doing a video wearing just that shirt. O'Neill, no, I meant another video with you wearing that same shirt. Also, were you wearing G-string or thong? So from Emmeline, I learned again there's this question of loneliness and connection, but at the same time, while she thinks that she's connecting and making these friends online, a lot of the people that she's communicating with, I feel, have a whole different idea in mind of what it is she's providing them. And in this way, you can see how her life becomes kind of sucked into this whole void of other people's fantasies, and she really becomes a character for them. And that's something that reoccurs over and over again in the rise of Peep culture, is people don't empathize with her and form community with her so much as they flick through her life as if they were watching a sitcom, and they're encouraging her to develop her character in ways that will excite them more and interest them more. All kinds of, based on whatever it is they're into. So that's me and Emmeline having a discussion at a local mall, which she put up on YouTube. Okay, so another character here who I met, who appears in the book. I say character, which is probably terrible because these are actually real people. This is Padme, and Padme runs this blog, Journey to the Dark Side. Padme is in a master-slave relationship. And on her blog, she does two things. She blogs about her master-slave relationship and all its kinky goings-on. And she also blogs about her very ordinary life as a mother of two and a housewife. So I'm going to read a little piece of this blog here. I just found out that Chuck E. Cheese, where we were going to have Skywalker's birthday party, had a pipe burst and they canceled his party on us. Skywalker is her son. She doesn't identify herself or any of the people she talks about. The woman on the phone didn't seem to think it was a big deal, but we have a ton of kids and people coming to the birthday later, and we have to try to find somewhere else. Also, the loot bags and the cake and the packaging were all done through Chuck E. Cheese. Now we have a lot of running around to do. Erg. So you can see this is the kind of mundane information that lots of people might provide in different formats online. But then she goes on to talk in that same post about how she really needs Master to come home and give her a thorough spanking to alleviate her stress. So things get kind of weird very quickly. And I said to Padme, I said, what is the appeal of this blog? Wouldn't it be better if it was just devoted to your sexual kinks or just your family life, so there isn't this strange kind of mix-up? And she said to me, we're not just one specific topic. A lot of people like that we're really open. We're not just spanking or sex. I think people are fascinated with us. There's definitely a lot of lurkers, a lot of return visitors. People are curious. They want to know what we're doing next. So for Padme, she's really kind of set it up in this way that she thinks is going to attract the most amount of people. So she has people who come who are interested in the sex, people who come who are interested in her lifestyle and in this master-slave lifestyle, and people who come who are just kind of interested in the mundane details of her life. And for her, this is an ideal kind of setup to attract the most people. There she's having her first spanking, apparently. You can't make this stuff up. You don't have to. So we had this fascinating talk, and one of the things that I asked her, I said, would you ever want your kids to see this? She said, oh, no, definitely not. Would you want your family to see this? No, definitely not. Her sister doesn't know about it. Nobody in her community knows about it. So again, she talks like Emmeline and Lisa about loneliness and kind of connecting to people. But there's the irony, of course, is that these revelations about her life, the things that would really connect her to people, are only provided for anonymous strangers. She does not give access to this information to the people who are closest to her because she doesn't want them to know. So there's a real kind of disconnect between what we think people want to do, or what she thinks she kind of wants to do, which is alleviate her loneliness and make connections and friends, to what she's really doing, which is, again, kind of turning herself into a sort of product. And she's really proud of the fact that over 1.5 million people have visited Journey to the Dark Side. This is a big, big thing for her. Okay, so I've met some of the characters. I've introduced you to some of the characters who appear in the book, who are samples of Peep. This is PostSecret. What I did after I talked to the people who do a lot of Peep is I started to talk to other people who are kind of involved in facilitating Peep culture. And PostSecret, which is run by Frank Warren, and Frank Warren lives in Maryland, and he started this sort of empire of secrets. And to me, he's kind of the high priest of Peep in many ways. If you're not familiar with this project, which has been running for quite a number of years now, basically it is secrets put up online that are provided to him by anonymous people who send him these postcards, these artfully done postcards, and on them is their anonymous secret. And then he scans them in and puts them on his website, postsecret.com. He also has a series of best-selling books that collect these postcards, and he does a lot of speaking tours where he shows the postcards and talks about why he does what he does. So I went to Frank to kind of try to understand this impulse to put our secrets out for all to see. This is what he told me when I asked him about the popularity of PostSecret. He said, some of the reasons people come initially might just be curiosity. But you can't look at these secrets without them resonating with you personally. You can recognize your secret on a stranger's postcard. Each secret is very individual, but the emotion and the feeling and the experience ties us into a commonality. So there's a kind of beauty there. There's a kind of sad empathy, which I think Frank is tapping into, this idea of recognizing each other through these secrets, and there's a real this idea of tying us into this commonality through this anonymous expression of our secrets, I think is a really powerful one. But I couldn't help noticing after talking to Frank that various other entities were sort of co-opting this idea and starting to try to do kind of versions of PostSecret for their own reasons. One of those entities is the Kleenex Let It Out website, which was kind of a marketing campaign where they encouraged people to go to Kleenex, and similarly they would let out their secrets. So here's a secret that somebody posted on the Kleenex Let It Out site. Writes, "Underdog of the world. I am 16, I am a sophomore, I am a rape victim. It happened this year by guys I thought was one of my friends, and to make it worse, it was at my church. He said he needed to talk, and I trusted him. My life changed, my friends changed, my schools changed, but most importantly, I changed. I have no one to talk about, and I wish I did. I also wish I wouldn't have trusted him." So that's the story that she posted on the Kleenex Let It Out site, and Kleenex helpfully provides little kind of tags at the end, and her tag was, "Find similar rape." So you can see how we go from Frank Warren's vision of a shared commonality of secrets to a more ill-advised encouraging of people to share secrets and sort of turning their secrets into product for these different marketing campaigns, which is maybe the not-so-pleasant side of peep culture. So then I began to think, okay, why do people peep? What is it? What is this obsession with peeping after all these experiences I've had and people I've talked to? And one of the things I started to think about was apes. As you can see, we got some apes going, and grooming, and the way that monkeys and apes spend hours and hours every day grooming themselves. And of course, they're grooming themselves, grooming each other. So, Here we see apes doing it to humans, who seem to love it, by the way. You don't see anyone going, "Get off me, monkey," which is what I'd be doing. So I came to this idea that we're searching for community in an age of alienation, that we are basically evolved from monkeys, but we haven't really evolved as far as we would like to think, and that we really are people who need constant community, who want touch and tactility, and we're searching for that through these peep culture endeavors, through these revelations. And so, for instance, you can think of something like Twitter as a kind of constant cyber grooming. And somebody asked me, an interviewer asked me, a reporter asked me, aren't these status updates annoying? Aren't they just pointless? And I said, well, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it as this really profound, constant updating that connects you to people's lives. Just the fact that we really desire to be known for just going about our lives. So instead of constantly trying to create better, more powerful resumes and turn ourselves into celebrities, we really also want to be known just for going about our lives. This is footage from The Nuke of the North, by the way, which was a documentary shot by Robert Flaherty in the 1920s, and it was one of the first documentaries ever made. And it was this incredible hit. And it really spoke already to this kind of rise of alienation in our society. So we live in these kind of alienated situations. We live in single-family dwellings. We live in apartments. We get in our cars. We drive to work. We go to our cubicle. And something about that world does not fulfill us. There's an element there that leaves us feeling like we need more. And peep culture is kind of rushing in to fill the gap. I like this video. I think it's probably fake, but it's funny. Here we have, I think it was called Office Freakout. So he's freaking out. It looks kind of too good to be true in a way. But we are lonely, and we do live in very alienating circumstances in our lives. And I think that this search for community, this desire to return to a more, in a way, almost more primitive way of life, where we're in constant company with each other, where we inherently need each other, and can no longer just sort of get in our car, drive away, get into our house, and lock the door and watch TV all night. We want to go back to those times in many ways. So I think that is a big factor in why we peep. There's another big factor in why we peep, and it is, of course, the rise of, wait for it, celebrity. There we go. There's Michael Jackson, the king of pop. I'm going to spare you my moonwalk, which is usually part of my show here. No. This whole question of celebrity, the rise of celebrity, which has really been perhaps the predominant element of our social and cultural life over the last, say, it's probably fair to say 60, maybe even 100 years. I think that we cannot underestimate the power and allure of celebrity. We see these people on the screen all the time. We see them being held up as our role models, as the people that we should want to be like. And so we have this this craving to be like them. At the same time, our coverage of celebrities, the way we see celebrities, is changing. So instead of admiring their performances, we now admire what they wear, who they're married to, how big their house is. Here we see a video that I found somewhere. Probably some sort of TV show, which it basically involves a helicopter flying over the houses of the rich and famous. So the more the coverage changes to reflect our obsession with their personal lives, the more we start to think, my personal life could also get coverage in this way. Enter, of course, the rise of high-speed internet and all the different Web 2.0 conduits, and you get people really accessing peep culture in this way. I'm going to read a quote from the book. This is something I wrote in the Peep Diaries. That is a reaction to some of the ideas around celebrity. The Peep Celebrity isn't becoming so prevalent in our culture because we're finally freeing ourselves from the shackles of an entertainment industry that for too long controlled who and what we watched. In fact, the opposite is happening. The Peep Celeb is indicative of just how entranced we are by the media machine's ability to create the star celebrity. We are drawn to the person product who seems to fit so effortlessly into a society organized around the principle that people can and should be reduced to hits, rating, views, box office gross. In such a system, we are encouraged to believe that our participation could lead to us being recognized and lavishly rewarded just for going about our lives. Meanwhile, we are also led to believe that our participation is in some way against the system. So we want to believe that putting ourselves online in the way that celebrities are covered is in some way against celebrity culture instead of just entering it. Here you see some footage from TMZ. This is Rihanna after being beaten up by her boyfriend. So you can see that this isn't all fun and games. It is, in fact, the process by which we make entertainment out of other people's misery. I began to think of all this as breaking the seal. This is the Star Wars Kid, one of the most popular videos ever posted online. And in many ways, the Star Wars Kid broke the seal for us on this whole idea of using ordinary people's lives as entertainment. Over 150 million people have watched this video, which is, you know, an incredible number. And this whole idea of kind of breaking the seal, that once we've started down this road, we really can't stop. Here we see our portly Quebec friend going about his Star Wars machinations. So I had this idea about breaking the seal, and I typed breaking the seal into Flickr and found thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of photos of people breaking the seal. And for those who don't know or have decided to forget, breaking the seal is, of course, a colloquialism for going to the bathroom the first time while you're at your keg party. So you don't want to go. You want to hold it in as long as possible, because once you go, then you're going to have to go repeatedly. So in my mind, we've broken the seal in many ways on this whole idea of peep culture, and this is leading us to a world where you know, we're actually happy to be photographed breaking the seal, going to the bathroom drunk. This is actually considered pretty normal in our society now, and in many ways is a good thing. You know, it's like, look at me, yeah, go for it. So, I mean, breaking the seal, I think has its good and bad elements to it. Obviously, when everyone I talk to talks about the addictive nature of it, how hard it is to stop once they start. So once you kind of start to get followers, you've broken the seal. GPS Snitch is a item that I ordered and got my hands on, and basically it's a tracker. I put it in my wife's handbag, and I began to track her. I'm still married. Thank you. I asked her permission. So I tracked her online. Basically, it shows a Google map, and she's a little dot, and she goes along, and I was tracking her going back and forth to work, and in a way I kind of broke the seal for my own desire to watch, because once I started tracking her, I found that I couldn't stop. I was literally obsessed with checking this Google map and where she was going, and I would go like, you know, I'd pretend to work for 10 minutes, and then I'd go and check this map. And at one point, she was biking to work. She bikes to work. You know, we live in Toronto. You can do that there. And she was biking to work, and I was watching her little dot travel at 12 miles per hour, heading east, and you know, it was all very friendly. I was going about my work. And what ended up happening is all of a sudden the dot stopped. And I was like, okay, I can, that's fine. The dot stopped. It's a red light or whatever. But the dot didn't start again, and I started to get all super paranoid. And I was like, what's going on here? Why has the dot stopped? So I immediately tried to call her on her cell phone, and she didn't pick up. So then I was like, I broke into a sweat, and I'm like hitting like reset, and the dot is not going, and I'm like convinced that she's been run over by a truck. And then finally, the dot starts to go again as I'm just about to start calling the police, check the local hospitals. So the dot starts to go again, and she's off to work. So later on, I finally got her on the phone, and I was like, what happened to you? Why did you stop? And she said, I stopped to get a sandwich, tuna sandwich to eat on the way to work. So, one of the things I talk about in the book is this whole idea of surveillance as entertainment and just how obsessed we get once we start doing these things. So again, you kind of break the seal, and we like to think that this is making us safer in some way, but in many ways it might not be. It may just be making us more obsessive, and this is something that, that must have hurt. He laughs. This is something that we have to consider in our society, is where all this is going in terms of, we can watch, but then I just wanted to watch more. The more I used GPS Snitch, the more I became obsessed with the things I couldn't see. And I wanted video, and I wanted audio, and I just became less happy with what I could, with the content that I could use to track her, which is already pretty amazing technology. So I'm going to end reading something from the book. This is kind of the conclusion of the book. And while I end, it'll play some nice videos here for you. And so I think I finally come to the one thing I know for sure, the one thing writing this book has made me absolutely convinced of. If there's one thing I now know, it's the value of not knowing. Our pragmatic, bureaucratic society sees it differently, of course. But so much of the mystery of life, so much of its inherent, unquantifiable worth, comes from that which remains a mystery. It's not knowing that makes us fall in love, that allows us to appreciate beauty, that permits us to revel in the moment, despite the indisputable fact that one day we will be sick, and that one day we will be dead. Why didn't people come to my Facebook party? Because they felt they didn't have to. They felt they already knew me. So why waste an evening getting to know someone you already know? Many times during the course of researching this book, I heard a familiar refrain, and this is something that I heard from Lisa Sargisi and from Emmeline and from Padme. They said to me when I asked them how they felt about the fact that thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of strangers knew the details of their intimate private life, they said to me, well, they think they know me, but they don't really know me. It's as if, having revealed everything, having laid bare every potential mystery, we want to pull back and reclaim that insoluble essential something we've given away. They don't know me. I'm still a singular human being, an enigma, an unknowable. Not knowing is an option, too. It's a choice I hope my daughter's generation will be able to occasionally make. As for us right now, well, we're busy frantically trying to know everything and anything, no matter how garish, invasive, or better left alone it may be. We're frantic about filling the void. But the void is a vacuum. It sucks everything into it. It's never full. It's never satisfied. Peep is bad when it exists to feed the all-knowing void. And, at the risk of getting all chicken soup for the grown-up daughter here, Peep is good when it feeds that which is uniquely human, our capacity to care without needing to know why. So, I'll stop there. Does anyone want to take a stab at identifying our lovely videos? There'll be a prize. What, nobody?
That one's the kid that had no cane. I don't know.
Right, David after the dentist.
Yeah.
And before David, there was, I believe, the dancing cadet. He also made an appearance. He skyrocketed to fame after his roommate planted a hidden camera in their dorm room. And there was one more. What's the other one? I always ask this question and then I forget the answer, which is probably not that bright. Somewhere on one of these cards it will tell you. Well, we'll let the masses of YouTube decide. It'll come to me later. Yeah, I'm here to, if there's any questions about what I've had to say. Well, I mean, yeah, that's one of the things that I hear a lot is, oh, it's much more frightening now, and then this question of erasing, and again, I'm by no means any kind of computer genius, but I do get the sense that it's harder to erase than it is to put the things on. And in the course of the book, one of the guys that I talked to for a while was this private detective who basically told me that in previous, he's up there in age, and he said, in previous decades when he would do his private detectiving, the Holy Grail was to get a picture of this person, so that you could then track them better. And now he said that, of course, the picture involves just putting their name into the computer, and the picture is the easiest thing to get, and that in fact most of his investigations now don't involve him ever leaving his office, whereas before it would be getting the picture, tracking the guy down, following him around, and accumulating information that way. So there's this whole kind of shift in how we can find out about people.
Where do you see this going? Do you think it's going to be, there'll be more of it, or do you think it's going to kind of peter out with the internet being, still relatively young? Do you think this is just an internet phenomenon, or just the way that we are?
Yeah, I think that it is going to continue. I don't think it's going to peter out. I think we're really looking at a kind of quantum shift in how humanity is going to relate to itself. I think in many ways this is the beginning. Again, I don't know anything about technology, and I don't know anything about business. You're thinking, what do I know about? I don't know myself. I know, very little, in fact. But what I have observed is that people are instinctually using these technologies. They're moving forward with kind of instinct and desire, as opposed to any kind of intellectual, really thinking through what they're doing. And I think that accounts for the crazy growth of something like Twitter, which I just read, from 2008 to 2009 grew 300% or something like that. So you've got this incredible desire to connect, to put ourselves out there. And I think it's just going to continue as technologies make it easier and easier for us to fuse our lives with our kind of parallel virtual lives, which we're starting to experiment with. People really want to do this stuff. I mean, if you ask me, is Twitter going to be around, or Facebook, or Google? That I can't tell you. In many ways, that's something that I think is kind of beside the point for what I'm looking at, which is just this big shift in behavior. Who's going to profit from it, and what the names are going to be, that I don't know. But I think there's no question that people are going to be continuing to do this, and doing it in even more reflexive and what we might have thought of previously invasive ways. You guys are quiet. Come on. Don't you want to know how drunk I got on Facebook night?
Who was taking the photos on Facebook night?
Well, I of course needed a photographer to capture the glory of Facebook night, so I dragged my next door neighbor, who's an amateur photographer, along with me. And see, the funny thing about Facebook night is I excluded the 40 or so people on Facebook who I actually knew. As real, I don't know, most of them you wouldn't call them friends, but you would call them associates, or whatever, people that I knew from the scene. So I didn't invite them. I only invited people I'd never known. And the photographer was technically not invited because he was in the category of Facebook friends I actually knew. But you know, you gotta. I mean, it was really interesting because I really did think that 15, 20, 30 people were going to show up at this thing, and you know, I really staged it more to ask people how they use Facebook and just get more insight into the whole social networking phenomena face to face. Thought it would be a nice little mixer, and I really had no idea that my attraction as a human being was so low.
How did you have 702 friends on Facebook? I mean, is this as a result of your book, or is it just from, do you really know 700 people?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't know, like 10 people. I just, as a writer and a public, you know, a bit of a public figure, it's not that girls are throwing themselves at me as I walk down the streets yet. You know, I know they will. But you know, it just sort of accumulated that people would say, oh, I read your article and I friended you. You know, I mean, I write articles, I've written books, and so I would accept their friendship, knowing, of course, that they weren't really my friends. And it's really interesting when you talk to people who use Facebook a lot, or a lot of these social networking things, where they'll say they all have these different rules, and maybe you in this room have certain rules, where they'll say, well, I only add people on Facebook who I've met in person, or I only add people on Facebook who I've had a drink with, or I only do this or that. And I always say to them, well, that's fine, that's good, you have your policy, but what's your rationale here? What are you actually trying to achieve through Facebook that you set those rules? And then they'll say, well, I don't know, like that's just my rule. So I mean, people, again, I think throughout the writing of this Peep Diaries book, I always found that people were almost always using the technology. They had an idea in mind of what they were using it for, but they were actually using it in a way that was totally contrary to that idea. And I think that you know, the Facebook party is one illustration of that, and the fact that we're often we adopt these rules and we think that we know what we're doing, but in fact we're usually kind of confused as to what it is that we are actually doing and why. So part of, you know, my message is that we should think more. We should step back and think a little harder about some of the ways we're using these interfaces and why we're using them, and what we actually want to get out of them.
I don't know. I'll kind of screw though. I can't think of that.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the the fascinating thing about this, is that people are really split in this. As people say, you know, I never want to take anything back. That's just who I am, and I'm going to put it all out there. And other people say, well, you know, I kind of wish I hadn't done that, or someone else hadn't done that. And a lot of times most of the material I found on that Pipple site about me was stuff from other people that other people had put up there, especially pictures and stuff. So you go to a party and someone takes a picture of you, they put it up. You know, there's not a lot we can do. One of the scenes in the book, I had this dinner with this amateur sex website group who all put up basically nude photos themselves, and so a bunch of these participants, couples gathered and had dinner with me, and it was all organized by this guy from Amsterdam who runs these sites, and his name is Igor. Again, you can't make this stuff up. And Igor, so one of the things they do is when they have their gatherings, they have their kind of social couples sex uploading party gatherings, and they wear different wristbands, and the wristband indicates what level of involvement you are in the scene. So if you're wearing a certain color wristband, that indicates to people that you're good to have any body part of you taken and put online, including your face, because often they get nude and run around. And if you have a different color wristband, maybe they can take pictures of you, like neck down, or no pictures at all. So in many ways, that to me is kind of a microcosm of where we're going in society. We're all going to be wearing these wristbands soon. Like, look, here's my wristband. Don't take pictures of me vomiting in the toilet after this tequila party, okay? You know, I'm wearing the purple wristband. But of course, will people respect that? I think what I've seen is that people really don't respect that, and that they're out there trolling to get you at your most vulnerable moment, you know, when you are maybe drunk or high and taking off your wizard costume when you shouldn't be. That's when people want to take your picture, and I think that's part of our cultural ethos, that celebrity, you know, that kind of feasting on the weak moments of celebrities that has almost spread to the rest of us. So we're like following people around, hoping they'll trip and hurt themselves, so we can video the action. It's not quite that bad, but it can be in certain circumstances. Anyway, okay.
Do you talk about the ways that kind of the Peep aspect plays into the political realm, kind of like that shooting in San Jose? I know that brought up a lot of controversy because everybody caught it from different angles on their camera. And then it pretty much like had them change their policy on shooting and who was convicted and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't look at the phenomenon of peep culture without looking at the political ramifications. There's been all kinds of scenarios in countries all over the world where people abusing their authority have been caught doing things essentially because of peep culture, because of this desire to capture all this material. So when you look at it from that perspective, you say, it's actually kind of good. It's actually a good idea that we're all running around with our cell phone cameras, because you never know when you're going to see these abuses of authority. On the other hand, I think it's also fair to make the argument that, you know, for every one time that you capture an abuse of authority, the other million things that are being captured and posted online are things that are much more mundane and maybe possibly a violation of someone else's privacy and their rights to go about their life without, you know, being posted online. So again, you have to weigh the good and the bad, and you have to decide for yourself. Everyone has to decide for themselves how they want to view this. And there's been a lot of talk about this, the rise of the transparent society where everything's on camera so everyone is equal. But I'm not sure that it's really working out that way so far. All right, thanks very much.